big story causing big problems swirling around Trump right now, and it could have major legal consequences. You may have seen the headline. Trump's company was discussing giving Vladimir Putin a $50 million penthouse as a kind of a gift to sweeten this now infamous skyscraper plan in Moscow, which brings me to our special report tonight. That offer alone, $50 million for a foreign leader, could itself be illegal. We're going to get into why. But first, you may have heard the larger defense to all of this kind of stuff, especially if you know Trump defenders, because they often say, look, Donald Trump's a novice, a newcomer, a disruptor, and as such, he could barely understand the intricacies here.
I think President Trump is learning the job, and some of the things that were said during the campaign, I think he now knows simply aren't the way things ought to be.
They elected an outsider president. They elected someone who had never been inside government.
He's new at government, and so therefore I think that he's learning as he goes.
He's new. He's learning. He doesn't know how anything works. But actually, on this story, Donald Trump, I'm going to show you, is intimately familiar with the criminal law. In fact, he's known about the most important federal anti-corruption law here that applies to this potential Moscow deal for years. It's something called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and it basically makes a bribery of foreign officials a felony punishable with prison. In fact, long before Trump ever got into these politics and took office, he was denouncing this law.
It's a horrible law, and it should be changed. I mean, we're like the policeman for the world is ridiculous. Every other country in the world is doing it. We're not allowed to. So it puts us at a huge disadvantage, and let them clean up their own act.
It puts us at a huge disadvantage. That was his public view, and that the law should basically be taken off the books. And Donald Trump's own Deputy Attorney General has a different view right now, and this is from just last week.
It's a horrible law, and it should be changed. I mean, we're like the policeman for the world is ridiculous. Every other country in the world is doing it. We're not allowed to. So it puts us at a huge disadvantage, and let them clean up their own act.
You may have noticed that while Donald Trump might like to be his own Deputy Attorney General or Attorney General, that was a different sound we wanted to use. But what I'm referring to is a speech that Rod Rosenstein gave just last week, reinforcing why this law is important and the DOJ will keep enforcing it. Now, if all of this sounds like we're getting real deep into the law, and we do that around here, I admit, let me tell you, this is a law that is so important and so dramatic because it's enforced. It's even come up in some pretty big Hollywood movie plots.
And it is illegal to offer gifts, money, the promise of money, or anything of value to influence foreign officials.
Is it? I have personally seen a bill from your law firm to the government of Saudi Arabia for $36 million.
Boom. So that's the movies. But this has ensnared a lot of real corporations in embarrassing and news-making cases.
There are a number of ways in which this plan could turn out to be illegal. If Blackwater followed through with the bribes, the company or its officials could face charges of obstruction of justice and violating the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act.
There are questions about whether the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act has been violated by Rupert Murdoch and his news empire.
Walmart is accused of using bribery to help expand its business in Mexico and then covering it up.
And those big stories have led to big consequences. Avon once paid over $100 million for this. A congressman who violated it, among other charges, faced 13 years in prison. Which brings us to Trump Moscow, because the report is that the Trump organization was looking into giving Putin this $50 million penthouse. We know Michael Cohen was also giving Trump updates, at least in general, about the project, and that his work on the deal, which he lied about initially, continued until June 2016. We don't know, and the BuzzFeed reporting on this is instructive, whether Trump himself was aware of this offer, and the Moscow project wasn't ultimately something that was built. But I can tell you that we have surveyed here at The Beat multiple attorneys who specialize in this law, and they tell us even an unsuccessful offer could be a felonious bribe under this law. Now, we don't know where this goes next. This could be under the jurisdiction of the SEC, although note that the man that Trump nominated to run it, Jay Clayton, has been criticizing this law that Trump already knew about and didn't like, saying its zealous enforcement might actually make corruption worse. There's another road this could go down as well. If this offer, and I say if because this is legal analysis, was found through the evidence to be in a larger plot to collude with a foreign power, if it relates to Bob Mueller's charge. To look at Russian election interference and collusion, well, then it's under Bob Mueller's jurisdiction. So here's where we go, and I'm about to bring in some experts who are all over this story. Mueller operates by the book. If he thinks this was isolated corruption, he'll hand it off to the SEC. Maybe it was done by a random person, and Trump never knew about it. But if Mueller finds evidence showing it was part of a larger plot, you can bet he'll keep it and stay on it. I'm joined now by Anthony Cormier, the BuzzFeed reporter who broke this story originally, and former federal prosecutor Paul Butler. Anthony, you brought this whole plot to light. What do you think is important about where the story is now?
I think it's important to know that Michael Cohen directly asked the Kremlin about this. We reported first that he went to the assistant of Dmitry Peskov. So this wasn't a harebrained scheme hatched up by him and an associate to market it. This was a thing that they directly offered during a phone call with the Kremlin. And I think that it's instructive to sort of look into the future, or at least begin to try to understand where the reporting is going to go. And we know right now that President Trump knew about this deal. We know that at least Ivanka Trump, we've reported in the past, knew about the Trump-Moscow deal. It would be highly unlikely for those three figures, but for Donald, for Ivanka, and for Don Jr. not to have understood that this was on the table is hard for me to believe.
You're saying your reporting doesn't confirm that, but it points that way.
Not at the moment. My reporting is that Michael Cohen was taking instructions on Trump-Moscow from the president and his two children. Whether or not they directly told him to take this step, I can't report yet, but it would be surprising.
Do you view the core of your story that you broke here on Trump Tower as something that is embarrassing and unseemly for the president, or that could be this kind of corruption violation?
Well, I mean, I know the Office of Special Counsel is taking it very seriously. That Trump-Moscow is not, we're not done hearing from the Office of Special Counsel on Trump-Moscow.
Which is a broad way of saying that they think a felony may be implicated.
They're looking at this for not the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, but also potentially collusion.
Right. That's bigger than.
Yeah.
So I'm going to quote the day's legal expert, DMX, who we be, the jerk, the fame, the work, the game. So Michael Cohen is caught up in the game. If Donald Trump Sr., Jr., Ivanka, if they're caught up as well, then they're guilty of at least one federal felony. So the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act makes it a crime to offer a bribe to a foreign government if you're a citizen of the United States. So the issues here will be, as you know, first, it has to be to influence a corrupt act. The defense, as we know it, is that, yeah, we're going to give Putin this $50 million condo, but it was a marketing ploy to get other rich Russians to buy in the building. If that's true, then that's a defense. If, on the other hand, it's about trying to get Putin and other Russians to approve the construction, then that's a crime.
That's when it violates this law. What does it tell you that, in contrast to the way a lot of Trump critics talk about him, that he is a bumbling, ignorant, whatever, I'm putting that all in quotes, in fact, he seemed very knowledgeable about this law to the point that he wanted it eliminated, to you and then you?
Because, as you know, Ari, the question with Trump is always criminal intent. Is there proof of a motive to be corrupt, or is he just ignorant? We know he's not ignorant about this act because he doesn't like it. He thinks that U.S. citizens should be able to bribe foreign officials because he thinks that that gives them a competitive advantage. So he knows it. The other question is, how much did Michael Cohen communicate to Trump when this was going down? And what we know is that Special Counsel Mueller, he has text messages, he's got cell phones, he's got computers. Remember that raid on Cohen's offices in April? His office, his home, boxes and boxes of documents. President Trump went ballistic. Now we know why.
I think that the critical question is going to be how much pressure, how much did Donald Trump tell Michael Cohen to pursue this deal? And we've seen in some of the text messages and the emails that we've published that Michael was deathly afraid of losing his job, that he was afraid that he was going to embarrass himself, quote, in front of Mr. T, which suggests to me that the organization itself was driving this, that they asked Michael to be quiet behind the scenes, to get this done, to not make it public. I think there are going to be other shoes to drop, and I think it's going to be critical to look at the organization, Trump, and the kids' role in it.
Well, it's significant, and it speaks to when you broke the story initially, it was all about the offer and the work, and now it's breaking in a way that shows it's central to Michael Cohen's pleas, and we're not done with what he's handed over. And on a lighter and more superficial note, because people could tell what a hardscrabble reporter you are, you're a bit like the Silicon Valley CEOs, where the more important they are, the more underdressed they are.
I was reporting all day.
All day,
All
so
day,
you're actually
baby.
doing the work.
Not done yet.
And some of these lawyer reporter types are just dressed up with nowhere to go. I really appreciate you taking your story here. And Paul, as always, appreciate
Always a pleasure.
your expertise on this story. I don't think this is the last we're going to hear of it. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.